All right, there's a green light. It's Thursday morning. And, well, yup. So, what are we talking about today? We're going to talk about the enemy. We're going to talk about this idea that the differences between the left and right are surface, menial. It's just not the case. So, let's start with a list of all the countries where socialism has worked.
Oh, nope, that's it.
Okay, yeah, we're done. Okay, good. Well, that was a good show. We'll see you tomorrow. No, 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 no. Okay, so here's what's going on. Um, Project Veritas has done it again. Done it again. Two more Bernie 2020 field organizers in South Carolina. Before we even dig into this, I want to talk about one of the things that you and I were discussing off air earlier, um, relative to these stories. That's 2020 field organizers. Okay, these are not random volunteers off the street. These aren't base level door knockers. These are these are staffers. These are people who work for the campaign. And I don't mean they work for the campaign as in they volunteer to go out and knock on doors and talk about Bernie. Uh-uh. These are people that are paid by the Sanders campaign. That's very telling. Um,
Yeah, just as a point of comparison, what if it was accidentally exposed that, whoops, Donald Trump had hired a white supremacist to run one of his field offices?
I need to that's something worth looking into. I bet you we could find a case where somebody was hired by the Donald Trump campaign who expressed racist views and then was fired for it. I bet you there's a case like that. Um, what I'd be happy to bet there is not a case of that one can point to is a Trump staffer being caught on tape suggesting that we should kill off all the black and brown people and then, you know, just hanging around and keeping on like nothing happened. I bet you we can't find a lot of cases like that.
And so let's be real clear what we're talking about here. Project Veritas went and did what Project Veritas do and has undercover journalists apparently embedded all over the Bernie Sanders campaign
Hmm.
because over the past few weeks, they've dropped multiple videos, and we now have four separate staffers going into great detail praising the Soviet Union, saying the gulags weren't really that bad, suggesting that the whole concept of property ownership, there should be no more landlords. And, if we're really, really lucky, we can have this whole revolution thing, and we won't actually have to kill anybody. We'll just take the land away and send Republicans to re-education camps. And I realize we engage in a lot of hyperbole to make our point. This is not hyperbolic. These are things that they say. These undercover journalists in the Bernie Sanders campaign get these campaign staffers somewhere, get a little beer and chicken wing in them, loosen them up, and then they start talking about what they really think, how they really feel, and what comes out of their mouth is utterly terrifying.
So,
If it
oh no, go ahead and finish,
if
and then I want to give you a little pushback.
if it had just been one, that, well, okay, you can just say it's one nut job, but the fact that you've got multiple paid staffers, we're up to four now, in two separate states, two separate very important states to the process. We're talking about Iowa and South Carolina, two of the three states that go first in the primary process, are expressing these type of views. Well, that's starting to look like a pattern to me, Bob. Just a thought.
So, okay, little pushback. You mentioned that sometimes we speak in hyperbole, and that's not what this is. Let me clarify some of my positions real quick. I I have talked often in the past about the insidious propagandist nature of the public school system, which works actively to prevent our children and worked actively to prevent us um, from acquiring the levels of education that I've achieved in my lifetime. The objective of the public school is not to educate children; it is to produce workers. the the public school serves two primary functions. It is the state funded child care service, daycare, so that you've got somebody to babysit while both parents are out of the house working, because a gross and dangerous movement in the guise of fairness for women halved the value of labor by doubling the supply of labor and causing our economic situation to be such that most lower middle class families need a need to be in a two income household because their labor is not worth what it should be. It's not worth what it should be because the labor market was doubled. The labor supply was doubled, and therefore the value of labor was halved, which means that now your work is half what it was. That's a bad thing. Now, as far as the re-education camps thing goes, what this is not evidence that there are some people interested in re-education camps. Rather, this is evidence to support my position, going back decades now, that the that the schools are precisely that. They are propaganda machines. They are de-education camps, as it were, and that is where they are now only because the radical leftists that control the boards of education, this is their objective and always has been. Creating these creating these kinds of situations where people are not disallowed from wrong think. They are they are disabused of the ability to do it. They are rendered incapable of holding uh, opinions that are contrary to the the prevailing leftist opinion that all men should be slaves, and and it is a moral good to murder your children. So when I talk about the horrors of the left, when I have talked about the horrors of the left, and that they want to kill you, that murder is in their hearts, that the fact that murder is in their hearts is why they support the wanton sacrifice of children, leading to statistics like that 25% of the millennial generation was aborted. I have never been speaking hyperbolically on these topics. They are the facts of the matter. This is just the mask cracking.
Yeah, this is Beto saying, "Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15s and AK-47s." That is exactly what this is. The left must lie. If the left told you the truth, if 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 the left was allowed to compete in the arena, and the absolute furthest extreme of their positions was what they argued for, um, you'd see a whole lot more of this. And it's why the left can't win the argument on the merits. Because most people, even your quote unquote average leftist, would say, now, hold on. We're talking about taking entire families and putting them in re education camps. Isn't that what they do in countries like China and North Korea? And the answer to that question is yes, that is in fact exactly what we're talking about. And that is exactly what they are talking about. Because this homogenous thing where they want equality of outcome, it can't happen organically. That's not how it works. That's not how it works anywhere in nature, not just with the human species. And the only way to make it happen is to force it to happen. And I do mean force that comes from the point of a sword and the barrel of a gun. That that is exactly what they want. Contrast that with the right. Whereas if we took the right at its most extreme position, there'd be no federal government at all. We'd be in some form of anarcho-capitalism or maybe some kind of mini-archism, whatever. But there would be so little government, you could do almost anything that you wanted, unfettered. And that's a whole lot more attractive than, oh, no, we just need to take the people that think the wrong way and force them to think the right way. And you don't even force people to change their mind. What you really do is force them to shut up about what they think. This goes back to when we were talking about the coronavirus and why it's so awful that it popped up in a country like China.
Winnie the flu.
Because
Yeah.
Winnie the flu, the Kung flu, yeah. But it's so awful that it popped up in China because you don't want to be the outlier in China. You don't. That's every bit as dangerous for you, your friends, and your family as it is potentially beneficial. Whereas in our tradition, in a capitalist tradition, you can fail and fail and fail and fail and finally have a successful idea. And we will measure your success as more important than your failures and recognize that your failures were important in order to get you to the level of success. In a collectivist society, no, you can't do that because if you fail, you bring the entire collective down. You don't just fail you fail the system. Whereas in our system, failure is not a bug, it's a feature. It's intended to operate that way. And don't kid yourself, there's a whole lot more leftists that believe this sort of thing. The main thing that the left lies about in these situations is they always promise, oh, my socialism is a kinder, gentler socialism. Real communism has not been tried. It would work if it were properly implemented. If we could just find the right balance of capitalism and collectivism, we would just have the perfect system. And it's never going to work that way because you're always going to have the step where you've got the gulags and the re-education and the forceful taking of property from one person and redistributing it to another. There is no such thing as a kinder, gentler socialism. It
Right.
doesn't exist.
So,
I
couple
mean,
things.
go ahead.
So, couple things. Egalitarianism on its face, the idea of equal outcomes is unnatural. There is, like you already said, there is not a way in which that occurs naturally, and it, therefore, the only way for it to occur is unnaturally, which guarantees use of force. It can only be done through violence. Um, because what you're talking about when you talk about guaranteeing the equality of outcomes is that, and this makes it doubly dangerous. One, you're guaranteeing that people will be punished for their success. That people who do well and who do good, which are two different things, people who are successful and earn money will be punished for doing good to the society, while at the same time you might not consider the subsistence level survival that is guaranteed to the majority of people by an egalitarian system to be a reward. But at a minimum, it means the sustainment of the less adequate. It means that the least useful among us survive, and that the least ambitious among the lowest level of our most ambitious, the ones that are the ones that are just right, just about ready to take the risk, they will choose not to. They will not take the risk, and they will not succeed. Which means that it can only serve to drag us all down together. Um, just as a
Well, that's the
rising tide,
problem with our
just as a
schools.
rising tide lifts all ships. If the tide goes all the way out, there is a bottom that we all get to rest on. Now, let's not forget that in order for such a situation to occur, there has to be someone who has the authority to use that force. So that means that if that force is going to be monopolized into a centralized authority, that we already have a situation where things are not equal, because there now you have two classes. You have the ruling class and everyone else, and it cannot be different. It unless you go to an actual anarchy, which is also a thing that cannot exist. There is no such thing as an actual anarchy. That does not exist. It is not possible. Um, Precisely because force exists. And then the other piece of it, uh, given, damn, I kind of lost that train of thought because I
That's
thought
okay.
about the next thing we're going to talk about for a second, and I lost my spot. But
That's okay. That first one was a bullet train, and it went 80 miles an hour right down the track. Give
yes,
yourself credit
sir,
where it's due.
1,776 miles an hour. All right. Now,
It's
while we're
starting to feel
talking
like
about
1776 in here.
so sticking with this, now we've seen four of these staffers, and I mean, think about the rhetoric that you're hearing, even out of mainstream actual presidential candidates. Hell yeah, we're going to take your guns. Oh yeah, no restrictions on abortions. We think you should be able to kill your babies after they've been delivered and kept comfortable, so we can have a conversation about whether to. Okay, that's mainstream conversation and rhetoric. So let's take a quick look at this. Liberals cheered congressional baseball shooter for targeting Republicans. Now, now, if y'all remember when this went down, um, the Bernie campaign, James Hodgkinson was also a Bernie staffer, and at the time, the Bernie campaign disavowed this man. They went out of their way to say he's one lone nut. This does not reflect on who Bernie Sanders is. Um, Bernie does not support what this man did, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And at the time, even I was guilty of it too, and I will be deeply rethinking that position every time something like this happens in the future. Whenever there's a lone gunman, the kid that shot up the black church, the Christchurch shooter, it's they always in the press are treated as if they represent all gun owners, even though it turns out that in most of those cases, not all, but in the drastic majority of those cases, the firearm was acquired illegally. Um, and they represent all white men and all Republicans. It's always all when it's white men's conservatives and gun owners. But you get a Taliban operative or an Al Qaeda operative who suicide bombs a mosque or a bus or a deli. and murders a bunch of people, it's always, oh, it was a lone wolf, lone wolf. The Pulse nightclub shooting, oh, it was a lone wolf. It's not representative of all other Muslims who actively seek as a doctrine of faith the extermination of homosexuals. No, no, this person who actively sought the extermination of homosexuals for the explicit stated reason that his faith demands it is in no way representative of his faith, which by doctrine of faith demands the extermination of homosexuals. Those two facts aren't related. Everybody, even on the right, made it a point to say James Hodgkinson is a lone nut. He does not represent Bernie Sanders. Um, and guys like Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh, they they made it a point to say we are better than these people. We are better than the leftists because we can recognize that somebody like James Hodgkinson is not representative of the whole. He does not represent what Bernie Sanders supporters are. Okay, that was cute and maybe even appropriate at the time. But the fact of the matter is, what we're seeing with these leaks coming out of the Bernie Sanders campaign, you may say it's only four. It's a small sample size. No, no, no. It's four different people in four different states.
Two different states, but yes.
Okay, okay. I'm sorry. It's four different people in two different states. It it is that's a lot. Okay, if we were talking about four people who were a little more pro-choice than the others, like most of them supported abortion all the way up until birth, but not after, and we just had four cases of that. No, no, no. We're talking about four people who are pro-Holocaust. I mean, their target is the white man, the capitalist, the Americans, basically, not the Jews. But what they support is the Holocaust. Well, okay, no, okay. Let me back that statement up a little bit. That's not fair. That's not a fair statement. To say that what they support is the Holocaust is not a fair statement because what they support is the other mass killing regime of the same era, the Soviet Union, which is responsible for an order of magnitude larger number of deaths caused on purpose by a centralized authority.
Yeah, if we just look at China and the Soviet Union alone, I don't think we'll ever know how many souls went down.
But we do
But
know that it was a lot more than the Jews that were exterminated by Germany. Now, that is not to excuse Germany. Let me be very clear about this. One of the problems with leftists, and this is the other place that I was going a minute ago. This was going to be my next point when I lost track a minute ago. One of the big problems with people like this, they get to where they are rhetorically through the lens of moral relativism. Make no mistake, there is not an argument for moral relativism that does not include defending the activities of Adolf Hitler as morally good. You cannot argue that morality is relative culturally and differs from culture to culture without also arguing that because morality is relative and different from culture to culture, Adolf Hitler was perfectly right to do what was done to the Jews. That the extermination of the Jews by Nazi Germany was a moral good. If you argue that morality is relative and that the murder of children is morally acceptable, then you are making the argument, you are making a pro Holocaust argument. Jordan Peterson points it out. He likes to drum on the Gulag Archipelago, and he points to the Nuremberg trials. The Nuremberg trials should have been the end of the argument of moral relativism, because it's this simple. The world convened a court and said, at a minimum, we don't do this. We may not have all the finer points worked out, but at a bare minimum, we don't do this. To support the argument of moral relativism is to argue that, well, no, some cultures do this, and that's okay because that's their culture and they're different from us.
Yep. Well, buddy, I have to do it. We have run a little long,
Yeah,
and
it's 7:15. I probably ought to get going my own self. So that's our show. I'm sorry we didn't have a TW this week. We hopefully next week the total win will be the acquittal.
yep.
But we will see you tomorrow. Oh, excuse me. We will see y'all tomorrow. It's time to go to work. Y'all be safe out there. All right, brother.
Later.